to my sewing room. We have such an exciting show for you today, and I think the next garments will show you a little bit about what we're going to do. The name of the show is the Spoke Collar Show. Now, when I refer to a spoke collar, this is what I'm talking about. A collar which has spokes, which you can see you can embellish with embroidery, or actually those spoke collars are just as pretty with nothing on them. Here's another beautiful example of a spoke collar. Let me hold this under so you can see. Do you see the lovely spokes joined by lace? And this collar has embroidery and a little Swiss motif on it. I'm going to travel down the skirt of this beautiful dress and let you see another very pretty feature. Some embroidery and the little scalloped or the scalloped hem there, and some beautiful hand embroidery on this little spoke collar dress. This spoke collar dress is absolutely beautiful, and I want to show you a little trick. The spoke on the front matches the diamonds on the bottom. Here's the spoke collar with its point de Paris stitch, stitching the lace down, the double needle pin tucks in the middle, and this little belt loop is one I'd like to just slip my finger up here and show you. Do you see it's a piece of insertion and two little pieces of edging used as a belt loop. Now, let me travel on down the skirt and show you the sweet little skirt, which has diamonds on the bottom, and they're double needle pin tucks, and then they're just the plain diamonds also with beautiful lace edging. I certainly do not want to forget our little boys, and this particular little suit is a little button-on suit and has a little spoke collar with feather stitch embroidery and little lace. It's absolutely beautiful for our little boy, and then just the classic button-on suit. Making a spoke collar is very easy to do. Come on over to the technique boards and I'll just show you how. I'm just so excited to show you this technique. You know why? It is so easy. And for a long time, spoke collars just scared me to death. I thought, well, gosh, I would never be able to do that. But you just watch. I want to show you two spoke collars. This one is simply zigzagged down. It's beautiful blue batiste, and the laces are simply put down with a zigzag. So as I show you other things that you can use during this show, you also know that you can just use a zigzag. Now, if you'll get in here real close with me and look at this lace, the way this lace is joined, I have used a Madeira applique stitch. It makes little holes, and that's one of my wing needle stitches. It's also called point de Paris or pin stitch with the wing needle and the sewing machine. Okay, here is how easy it is to make this collar. First of all, I trace off on a square piece of fabric. Do you see? Just a big piece of fabric. I trace off my collar, and then I pin down the spokes. In other words, I pin down the pieces of lace, draw the neckline and the center backs. I'm still working on a big piece of fabric there. The next step is to come in and shape the lace into the scallops or the scallops, whichever one you want to pronounce it, on the edges. I thought I would come over here on this side, right over here, and show you how to shape laces into a curve. First of all, I pin the lace on the big side of the curve. Then, at the corner, I come in, I put a pin on the outside, a pin on the inside. Then I fold the lace back on itself, remove the pin, in this case, on the inside that goes through two layers, and then I bring the lace out, and look at there. There is a beautiful miter that is folded in, and then I just stick the pins into any kind of a board, any kind of a lace board. Now I've got one more little thing over here I've got to do. You see, that's what I call floppy lace. That is not pretty and flat like the rest of the collar. I have to do something to make that lace lay down nice and flat. So I'm going to go in and pull a thread. All of the French and English laces have a pull thread built into the heading of the lace. Watch what happens. Let's see if I can get my hands out of the way. Watch what happens when I pull that thread. Do you see there? The lace just lay down as pretty as you would ever want it to. That's my next step. Everything is shaped on there. Next comes time to sew it down. Over here on this side, I have used the Madeira applique stitch, the pin stitch, or the Point de Paris stitch to stitch down these rows right here. And of course, you know I do not sew this in navy blue thread when I'm making a portrait collar for my little grandchildren, but it's easier to see on television. Now, come over here to this side with me. This side is simply stitched down with a zigzag. Remember, you do not have to have a thing except straight and zigzag on your sewing machine in order to do this beautiful Madeira collar. Now, the last step I have here to show you, well, if it doesn't jump off the board here, is how you can gather lace and zigzag it on, or else you can put entredot around the edge. You can do machine entredot, or you can stitch in entredot using the wing needle entredot stitch on your sewing machine. After all of the treatments are applied to the big square of fabric, after everything is applied, then you cut away. Can you see how the fabric has been cut away over here on this side? In other words, you are working with a big square of fabric, stitch all the goodies down, and then trim it away. That is the basic principle of making a scalloped or scalloped collar on the sewing machine. Here we are, my final version. Look on this side first. I have entredot and the gathered lace all stitched down, and as you can see, the blue collar has now been cut away. Travel over here with me to this side. Do you see how I stitched even, this is really important now, I even stitched the gathered lace down to the collar before I come in here and trim away all of this piece right here. In other words, you make the whole collar before you trim it away. I have a really fun collar over here to show you. So come on over to the sewing machine with me, and I'd like to show, well, if I don't fall down first, I'd like to show you some tricks on using wing needle entredot. Okay, now I'm going to do wing needle entredot in a curve is going to be my first stitch. And I'm really going to just talk to you a little bit as I travel around here. So just kind of listen to me because I can sew and talk at the same time. I guess you figured out that I do that well. All right, this is a wing needle entredot stitch that moves backwards and forwards and makes a hole. You have to let the machine do the work. It goes back and forth and then moves on. You can't twist it and turn it. And when I'm sewing in a curve, you're going to think I'm crazy, but this is the truth. You have to sew straight. Now just watch and let me talk about it as I do wing needle entredot work. Now then, if your machine doesn't have wing needle entredot stitch, I'm probably going to give you permission to go get yourself a new machine that does have wing needle entredot. All right, now then, I'm beginning to go into the first gradual curve, but I want you to know that I'm sewing straight. I sew straight as I can sew straight, and then only veer just a little bit. You know why? If you don't do it that way, it won't look right. You'll have a little hole over here and a little hole over there. So, and also I'm going to get my shish kebab stick here, my wooden shish kebab stick to hold my lace just a little bit. Now I'm doing the wing needle entredot to sew the lace down all the way around the curve. But remember, it is very important that I sew straight. And then you just need to kind of practice a little bit in order to get this beautiful stitch. All right, now I'm going to stop just a minute and show you what that wing needle entredot looks like. There's my little my lace string I pulled right there. Can you see those holes? It makes the most beautiful hole, and it really does look like the turn of the century hem stitch machines is exactly what it looks like. Absolutely beautiful. As I said, you know, I gave you permission to go ahead and get yourself a new sewing machine. No, I'm really just kidding you. You can just use straight and zigzag. But listen, if you haven't seen the new sewing machines today, you need to go see them anyway. They're wonderful. Now, here is another really fancy trick. I just love wing needle entredot. And here's where I really do need my wooden shish kebab stick too. I learned to use these shish kebab sticks in Australia. Nearly every woman sews with one of these in her right hand when she's working. Now I'm going to shove these little gathers. Okay, now let's see what I'm going to do now. First of all, I guess I better put my thread back here. Hang on just a minute. All right, now then, here we go. Here we go, just 1 minute. I'm going to do the wing needle entredot stitch. In other words, you know what I'm doing right now? I'm stitching in entredot. I'm stitching in entredot to attach my lace, my flat lace, and my gathered lace at the same time. And you know what? It will look as if you've put, say an extra $50 worth of entredot in your dress. As a matter of fact, you can tell your husband that, honey, if you'll just let me get one of those new machines, I can stitch in $50 worth of entredot right out of that new machine. I don't know whether you'll buy it or not, but at least you could try. Okay, do you see what I'm doing here, ladies and gentlemen? If there are any men watching the show today, let me scoot that over there. I'm stitching in the wing needle entredot work to attach the flat lace as well as the gathered lace. All right, here we go. Let me give you a close-up of that. See the, let me pull the strings out of the way. See that beautiful entredot stitch right there? That stitches together the flat lace and the gathered lace, and it will look as if you have put Swiss entredot on there. Now that is just an easy trick to do. I have another blouse to show you. This time it's a lady's blouse because, as you know, on this series we're featuring a lady's blouse. This lovely blouse has a spoke collar with a little bit of lovely embroidery in each spoke. Do you see the little bit of embroidery? The beautiful bullion rosebuds. And later on in the series, we have a show to teach you how to do bullion rosebuds by hand. Now, how did this lady's collar come about? Let me just show you. Let's look one more time at what I call the big picture. First of all, I traced the scalloped collar off on a big white piece of fabric. Then I placed my spokes down, and this time I have them just zigzagged. I did not do a wing needle entredot, just a zigzag. And I zigzag the wonderful scallops down, and then I pull a thread. I'm going to pull a thread right here in my, pull the gathering thread in my lace. French and English laces have gathering threads built into them. So you can pull the thread and gather your lace, and then starting around here, I put my lace flat on the back collar, and then I gather it starting around this area, and I zigzag it all together. Now remember, people, after every bit of this work is done, then and only then do I come in and cut away the outside of that square. That is how easy and simple it is to make a spoke collar. Do you know we have a little doll who is just waiting to show you her spoke collar dress? My little doll looks so pretty in her blue and white spoke collar dress. Notice the little collar. It's done out of white batiste with the little spokes, and I think especially pretty is the little machine embroidered motif in blue on each spoke. I'm going to turn her around to the side so you can see how adorable her little sleeve is too, with this little shape and once again the little machine embroidered design. Now the little dress is the antique pattern reproduction that we have all of the doll dresses in this series. Her little skirt is so sweet. Do you see the little motif embroidered in blue and the little lace shaping and coming on down to the little straight insertion and gathered edging on the bottom of her skirt? Actually, it's very easy to make a spoke collar. Let's go over once again the techniques of making a spoke collar by going over how the spoke collar was done on my doll dress. First step is to trace the spoke collar off on a piece of fabric. In this case, it's traced off on white Swiss batiste. The second step is to put the little spokes down. Those go down first. And then around the little spokes, shaping lace into a curve, comes the lace insertion that goes around the edge. The final step on making this little spoke collar, if you would like to make your own entredot on your sewing machine, you can, or if you would like to purchase Swiss entredot, you can do that also. But anyway, you put the entredot around the collar, leaving the edge on while you put the entredot on, then trim it off, and then over here I have gathered my lace, butted it up to the collar, and simply zigzagged it on to the entredot edge of the collar. See how easy it is to make a doll spoke collar. Next, I have a really precious craft for you. You talk about an easy craft. I have one for you today. This particular picture frame is very easy to make, nothing but hot glue gun. You take an antique picture over to any kind of photo lab and have them shoot it in a sepia look, and that's what you get. And by the way, if you don't have any relatives with an antique picture, just go to the antique store, buy you a picture, and invent you some relatives. Okay, we're going to take dried pansies and we're going to glue it all the way around. Here's how this is made. First of all, you buy the pansies in a little case like this at the craft store. They actually are really dried pansies. You take your mat, you glue the pansies all around the mat, See, some of these aren't glued down yet. You just put them up there and glue them around your antique picture. Then you cover some board with a piece of fabric. That'll be your backing. And then we're almost ready to start gluing. But first of all, we have some braid to go around it. And I've put my little tassel on there for the bottom. You simply stick your braid in between and you glue gun it as you go around. Let me see if I can slip it underneath there. You get the idea anyway. And then you fix a little top, the little braid here on the top to hold your picture with, and there's a little tassel on the bottom. Next, I have a beautiful pillow for you. I have the easiest little pillow project for you. I almost would call this a fake spoke collar pillow. If you look over here with me, the spokes on this pillow, and I'll show you how easy they are to make in just a minute, come all the way across the pillow, and then there's a little Swiss motif with a little bit of embroidery. It's kind of a puffy Swiss motif. This one is really easy to make. First of all, I draw the circle off on the pillow top. Then I draw the lines, kind of like cutting a pie. You know how you cut it into 8 pieces? Then I put the strips on each piece and simply zigzag them or wing needle entredot them down. You see how those spokes were made? Okay, zigzag them or wing needle entredot them down. Then here is my little Swiss motif. This one has a P on it for pulling. You can use any motif you want to. And as you zigzag it onto the pillow, if you want to make it puffy, you leave a little opening in the top and just simply, well, this is too much batting, but you get the idea. Simply stuff the batting in behind there to make it puffy. And then you finish your pillow. Now that is one easy Swiss pillow. And see, it looks as if you've made this very difficult pillow, and actually it takes almost no time to do the little fake spoke pillow. Next, we have a wonderful silk ribbon embroidery stitch for you. I am pleased to have as my guest today, Kathy Brower. Kathy is senior editor of So Beautiful magazine and also our silk ribbon embroidery specialist. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. It's great to be here again. Today I'm going to show you how to do a buttonhole stitch. And before we had our new fancy sewing machines that we could just throw on autopilot and let it sew a buttonhole for us, this was a very practical stitch, and our grandmothers used this stitch to make buttonholes. I'm going to show you how to do that, but first I want to show you a couple little samples. This darling linen dress that was made by our very own Margaret Taylor has a silk ribbon bouquet in the center, and right here she's used that buttonhole stitch to make beautiful flowers. If you can see these tiny little lavender flowers, she said they were hollyhocks. She's more of a gardener than I am, but they make wonderful, cute little wheels on little wheelbarrows and all kinds of little picture things. This is a wool blanket. It's in the process of being completed. Westa Chandler's making this for a baby room. And here, this is wool embroidery, which is practically where this originated. Any kind of floss embroidery or wool embroidery is where silk ribbon got its stitches. This is another hollyhock buttonhole stitch flower. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do the buttonhole stitch. I'm going to show you the line buttonhole stitch, which is great for your crazy patch projects, and also to cover those seam lines. It's also great to use to applique shapes down onto flat base fabrics. And then I'll show you how to do the hollyhock flower. To begin, you want to start, I've drawn, as you see, 2 rows here, 2 parallel rows. This is just to give you a guide if you don't have a seam line to go by. I'm going to start here in the corner at point A. Bring it up, come over just a little bit, bring my needle back up on that line, straight up. Let me get that right in the hole. Keep my ribbon behind my needle and pull it through. As you see, I've got an upside down L there, or part of a square. The next stitch will be exactly the same. And I'll come up and I'll keep my needle in front of my ribbon, and as you see, you'll just continue to make a row. Now I'm doing this large so that you can see what I'm doing. All right, and then to end it, you would just go straight down into the fabric, like so. Now, to do the circle, you have to start with the beginning stitch, and you'll start on the circle, pull it up, and then you'll go to the center. Here's the center, and I'll come up right beside where I went down, and then I'll have to wrap my ribbon over my needle. That's just a starter stitch. And then you'll continue doing the buttonhole stitch from the center out, working all the way around the circle, remembering always to put your needle in front of your ribbon. And you'll just continue on around until you have it complete. When you come back to this point, you'll insert your needle down here, and you won't even know where you started and stopped your circle, and it's that easy.
Oh, Kathy, that really does look easy.
Yeah, it's fun too.
Thank you so much for sharing the buttonhole stitch with us.
Thank you.
Next, we have a perfectly adorable quilt square for you. I have a beautiful spoke collar quilt square for you. If you'll look over here, you will see we have a circle of white silk dupioni with a circle in the middle cut out, and a satin stitch P in the middle, and lace around the edge, and silk ribbon stitched down. Very, very easy to make. First of all, you cut a circle using a dinner plate if you would like, of silk, of white silk. Using your teacup if you would like, cut the center and the middle out, and then take a piece of silk ribbon, lay it down all the way around, and use a feather stitch to stitch it down. After stitching down your little pieces of silk ribbon using a feather stitch, then the lace is gathered. In this case it's ecru lace. Gather your lace, butt it up to the edge, and zigzag the whole thing down. And if you would like to, then you can monogram anything you want in the middle. In this case, I have an initial, I have a P for Pullen, but you could do some silk ribbon embroidery. You could do any stitch you would like to right there in the middle, and that is your fake spoke collar quilt square. I'd like to invite you to my attic to see one of my beautiful turn-of-the-century antique garments. My antique garment that I have for you today is a really beautiful little white piqué coat. Now, I purchased this garment in France, although I can't guarantee it was made in France. I did purchase it in France. And I'd like to show you some really beautiful construction. The little coat has this collar on it, which is almost like a cape. You see it extends way off the sleeves. As a matter of fact, let me hold this up and show you. See, here's where the little sleeve starts, and the little collar comes almost halfway down the sleeve. The construction is absolutely elegant on this little outfit. The seams are all French seams, and the Swiss eyelet has been gathered and rolled and whipped on by hand. Going down to the bottom of the little coat, we find 2 tucks, a piece of Swiss insertion, and a piece of Swiss edging. I'd like to tell you briefly how you tell the difference between Swiss eyelet, which was made by machine. And by the way, the first eyelets began to come out of Switzerland about 1850, so the machine-made eyelets were begun at that time. And I want to tell you the difference between the machine-made and the handmade. You can turn the eyelet over to the back and look at it. The threads, you look where the threads cross. In other words, you can see everywhere the threads cross. On the different patterns as they repeat, if the threads cross in exactly the same place on the patterns as it goes all the way around, then you're sure, or whether 99.99% sure, it is a Swiss made by machine. If the threads cross at different places, in other words, it crosses up here and it crosses down here and it crosses over here, then that is the way usually to tell if it is made by hand. I'm so glad that you were able to be with me in my sewing room today. It has certainly been my pleasure to have you, and I certainly do hope once again that you'll be able to join us next time in Martha's Sewing Room.